Hello and welcome back to another session of IFMA's World Workplace Virtual 2020. In this session of the virtual conference, we'll talk about power of partnerships, an interdisciplinary approach to workplace strategy. I'm your host, Kim Springer, with the IFMA events team, and with me today is our moderator for this session, Megan Schutt, our presenters, Ellie Moody and Michelle Raymond, and our panelists, Joe Hood, Jonathan Johnson, and Justin Joyner. Lots of J's. And at this time, Megan, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you to get the session started. Thanks for being here.
Great. Thank you, Kim. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Today, we'll be talking about the power of partnerships and an interdisciplinary approach to creating a workplace experience strategy. Thank you to Ellie Moody from Steele Strategies and Michelle Raymond from Fox Architects for inviting their friends to join us for this conversation. We cannot be all things to all people. So much goes into building a workplace experience for employees. Ellie and Michelle, they will talk us through all of the facets of partnerships that have been successful, the challenges, the opportunities, looking at all of those pieces. And after their initial presentation, we'll be joined by their colleagues in the HR, facilities, and IT world as well. So I'd like to kick us off by introducing Michelle Raymond. Michelle is Director of Workplace Strategy at Fox Architects. She has 20 years of commercial office design experience and specializes in workplace environments and solutions. Ellie Moody is the Director of Workplace Experience for Steele Strategies. Ellie advises clients on how to leverage the workplace experience and culture to really achieve the goals and advance the goals of organizations and individuals. As Kim mentioned, I'm Megan Schutt. I'm the Senior Associate at Steele Strategies. I work alongside Ellie on the Workplace Experience team on organizational development, change management projects, and all kinds of advising for clients on workplace culture as well. So, Michelle, I'd like to kick it off to you to start us. There's everybody. And then after Michelle and Ellie go, we'll come back to the panelists to discuss what we talked about in the first presentation. So Michelle, over to you.
Thank you, Megan. So what we're going to start with today is discussing the IFMA Delphi methodology study that was conducted this past July and August. Many of you may have participated in it. It was a real-time study where over 248 professionals, subject matter experts contributed. And that information was a consensus-seeking debate. It wasn't just your typical question and answer survey. And it used both qualitative and quantitative methods to bring data together. The focus of the study was on the future of the workplace. And some of those findings are what's going to be leading our discussion today. So we're going to go through those quickly. If you want more information on the assessment, it's called the Expert Assessment, the Workplace Post-COVID-19. You can find it on the IFMA website. So some of the main takeaways that we got from this assessment was remote work is here to stay. We expect that in some capacity, remote working will continue well into the future. The office as a physical environment will not disappear. It will morph and change and become more of a hub for social interactions and collaboration. Focus on the well-being of the employee has become much greater. There's also a shift in mindset from what defines a workplace. So it's shifting from the workplace as a physical environment to the workplace as an experience. And that's an important distinction, and we'll follow up more on that as we go through the discussion. There's also an increased focus on HR and their role in development of a workplace strategy and management. There's also shifting responsibilities that are perceived for the facilities manager and greater collaboration that's required with other disciplines. Can you go to the next slide, Megan?
Yep.
So all right, thank you. So when asked which department should take the lead in putting together a workplace experience strategy, the majority of the respondents came back with HR. And what this is showing is there's an increased focus on the experience of the individual employee, and that's taking greater priority in our thought process. Second was the CEO business management group, as well as workplace strategy. And that's showing a focus not only on the individual's experience, but how they relate to the larger organization in terms of mission and vision. You can go to the next one, Megan. So what's that telling us? It's telling us that the employee experience is becoming now the focus of the workplace strategy development. And when we look at the employee experience, we understand that it's a complex series of interactions with multiple overlaid systems. So each system within an organization provides a facet of that experience, whether it's technology, policy, the physical space, culture, and so forth. A successful workplace experience strategy focuses on alignment of those systems with the business goals and vision. So this is a shift in paradigm that reinforces the need for an interdisciplinary partnership across disciplines. And Ellie's going to walk us through what exactly we mean by an interdisciplinary partnership. Ellie?
Thank you, Michelle. Thanks, Megan. So one of the experts' assessment findings regarding workplace strategy that we found really interesting was on page 5 of the assessment and the executive summary, where it began talking about facilities management and HR and other support functions. They'll either compete or collaborate in the workplace transformation. And that's really what's prompted our conversation today with our panel. This idea of competition among disciplines, while it could be healthy, it otherwise assumes that one discipline really knows more than any other discipline and is better suited to create the workplace experience strategy over another. And so what we begin to see, and quite frankly, what we're seeing now, are single disciplines trying to be all things to all people, as Megan said earlier. And that's not always the positive force that's necessary for a win-win-win when we're creating a workplace experience strategy. So that means the discipline suffers, the client organization that we're helping suffers, and the workforce for whom we're actually creating or trying to create a positive workplace experience could suffer as well. And the reality is that if we're harnessing the power of the collective and co-creating the workplace experience strategy, that is really the bedrock of creating it. And without an interdisciplinary partnership, that it would be really difficult to achieve. So rather than HR trying to be the new FM and FM trying to be the new HR and CRE trying to be the new design team and the design team trying to be the change managers, what we propose is that we build interdisciplinary teams that leverage the power of the collective ideas and the theories and the practices and the experiences that each discipline brings to the partnership. So when we focus our lens on interdisciplinary partnerships, we can help to support each other's disciplines so that we can all be the best at what we do and improve the workplace experience outcomes for everyone involved. Next slide, Megan. So to tee up our panel discussion today on interdisciplinary partnerships, what we want to do is start with defining it to make sure that everyone fully understands what these terms actually mean, because oftentimes interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary are used interchangeably, but they mean very different things. So we're going to start with disciplinary. That is one person from one discipline working alone to solve or reach a goal, solve a problem or reach a goal, which in our case today for our conversation, the problem or goal is the workplace experience strategy. Multidisciplinary means multiple people from multiple disciplines working in silos to solve a common problem. There is no knowledge, skills, or data sharing or integration of ideas, theories, and practices. They are working completely in silos from the lens of their discipline. But when we talk about interdisciplinary, it's multiple people from multiple disciplines working together across discipline boundaries, sharing collective knowledge, sharing collective skills and data, and then integrating their ideas, their theories, and practices to solve the common problem and to reach a shared goal through shared vision and shared purpose. So having a diverse and inclusive interdisciplinary teams, they will actually outperform multidisciplinary teams by 50%. That is huge. And that's on outcomes, team member satisfaction, that's on long-term project viability, stability, and sustainability. So if we have a choice, which we do, we want to encourage interdisciplinary teams and partnerships whenever possible, especially when it comes to co-creating the workplace experience. Next slide, Megan. Oh, time for our panel discussion.
Yeah, it is. Thanks, Ellie, and thank you, Michelle. I'll take a second to introduce our panelists, and then we'll really get into the meat of this year. Justin Joyner leads human resources for a hyper-growth tech company called Datadog. He focuses on people developments, organizational design, and employee engagement. Jonathan Johnson is Director of Facilities and Security at SiriusXM and Pandora. Jonathan has a master's in facilities and environmental management, and he's interested in the impact of the physical environment, specifically on tech recruitment. Joe Hood joins us as the Director of IT at Quinn Evans. Joe got his start 20 years ago in the Marine Corps and has led database, networking, and program initiatives. And recently, he's been focused on supporting remote staff across 5 offices and several field sites on software and hardware solutions for working remotely. So welcome, panelists, and thank you for joining us. I'm going to turn the slides off here so we can see your faces. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
I would like to start with a question for all of you, and I'll go around my screen here. And I'd like you to all weigh in on these first two. So the first question is, how do you define workplace experience? So I'm interested in thinking about this shift to thinking about it as an employee experience, workplace experience. How do you define it? And how does your discipline factor into creating a quality workplace experience strategy? And Joe, I will kick it to you first from the IT perspective.
From the IT perspective, the whole world has changed with the kids at the lap in the conference watching the screen. They want to be part of mom and dad's life. And what we found is anything that we get them from their office. I mean, the first day we were giving their workstations to them. It's just a matter, anything they had at the office, try to do the same thing at home.
Thank you. Jonathan, workplace experience. How do you define it?
I kind of cherry picked a lot of it. So I look at it as interdisciplinary, which is the title of this whole thing. It's like that moment in the movie when they say the movie's title. Interdisciplinary approach to the employee journey to include environments for throughout the whole experience. That's digital and for both personal and professional wellness. I think, it's one of those things where the personal aspect is often left out. So I kind of try to incorporate that as well.
Thank you. Michelle.
So when we look at workplace experience, we're looking at it as a series of experiences that you have. So we've mentioned IT, HR, so there's policy, culture, how you interact with technology, how you interact with the built environment. All of these experiences are essentially different systems that are interwoven, and no one system can truly be successful without the support of the others. So really understanding how they can create a cohesive experience in unison. And so as my focus is on the built environment, we know from years of research that the built environment has an influence on the way people perceive the organization, on their actions and their mindsets and behaviors. And so we look at the physical space as a tool to help to develop the culture and mission of the organization. So just as your brand is the outward voice of the organization, the office is your body language. It conveys through the use of physical space what your mission and values are. And so when that's disjointed from some of the other systems within the experience, it can create confusion and lead to really hindering the mission long term.
Thank you. Justin, how about from the HR perspective? What is the workplace experience and how does HR factor in?
Yeah, I think it really could be said another way too. It's like workplace feel, and I think that's when you think of experience, it's whether in a physical environment or, in a remote environment as things are changing every single day, how do you feel when you come into work? How do you feel when you leave work that day? And I think, all the things that happen in between that really lead you to the workplace experience. Whether good or bad, right? And it can ultimately be what leads you to stay at a company or remove yourself and try something new. I think HR really, especially in the new world, kind of plays the glue of the workplace experience, and I think that, we have a job to really know the ins and outs of every function within the organization, and from that be able to give a perspective that maybe otherwise would not be there if we did not kind of sit in that seat. And I think that's a really important seat in today's world, especially.
Thank you. And Ellie, how would you define workplace experience, and what role do you think your organizational development plays in that?
Yeah, so following Michelle and Justin's comments, Michelle talked about the collection of experiences and Justin talked about feeling, and I'm going to just combine those two into the workplace experience, because I think that the workplace experience, while it is a collection of experiences, I think it's a collection of the moments that we experience that happen in the workplace that leave this emotional impression. And it's that sentiment, it's that result of those moments that create the experience. And so the way it makes us feel, that sort of indelible emotional impact that it leaves on our memories for a long time to come, I think is what creates, or what is, the workplace experience. And as an organization development and change professional, I think that my role really combines the art and science of helping organizations to blossom. We focus our entire careers on OD, on culture, change, strategy. That's the whole existence of the OD profession. And we do help organizations enable themselves to sort of better respond and adapt to change over the course of time. And I think that is where we are today with workplace experience strategy. So I think OD is an important element here.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Any final thoughts on that before we go to our next question? No, okay. This is for all of our panelists too. What do you see as the most important requirement for crafting a comprehensive workplace experience strategy? So you can give one or two, but like the top thing that you're thinking about as you're putting together a workplace experience plan or initiative. And Justin, I'll start with you first.
Yeah, I think it's really important for the plan to be inclusive of everybody, regardless of race, gender, other protected classes. That's where you start bringing people together, is when everybody feels welcome, no matter who they are, where they sit, what function they are in, within the organization. I think that it doesn't matter, as long as you are making it inclusive, and then also focusing it on the company values, tying that to the strategy where applicable. It's not always possible, but where it is, I think it's important to do that so that people can connect further, to the organization.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that. As well as COVID, we're also there are a lot of social justice issues that, especially around race this year, that have come to the surface. It feels like we're at a tipping point where people are really acknowledging that and honoring it for the importance that it has. I'm glad that you brought that up, especially now too, and I hope that focus is here to stay. Ellie, how about you?
So to build on Justin, his comment, I think I've got two requirements that stick out for me. That the first is really a human-centered approach that uses empathy as a guide. And so if we're looking at inclusion, we really need to include the employees as part of this, because it's their experience after all, right? And then the second, I think, is taking a systems thinking perspective or approach. And what I mean by a systems thinking perspective is that we need to look at the big picture, of the whole organization and the whole experience, rather than just the parts. And I don't think we can talk about the experience of work until we're speaking across systems, across components, and understanding that everything within our organizations is connected. And then we need to build on that. We need leaders who will facilitate and try to help make those connections.
And Ellie, in your experience, are people like open and receptive to that idea of employee engagement through this whole process and a change strategy, or does it take a little persuading?
Sometimes it takes a little persuading. I see Justin smiling over there. But I think when we start to talk about diversity of perspective and experience and inclusion and why it's important to have the employees at the helm, then it starts to make sense to our leaders, and usually they'll baby steps.
Yeah. Jonathan, your thoughts on the most important requirements for crafting a workplace experience strategy?
Yeah, I'm completely in line with Justin and Ellie. My number one is human-centered design. I think there's no one approach to any kind of organization. And I see a lot of ping pong tables with cobwebs or Norman doors still to this day, and just kind of driving that home, and kind of making sure that we understand that. I think we think of work solely as a work, but if an employee has to fight 2 hours of traffic each way and they can barely pay their rent, what does a ping pong table do for them, right? So just kind of not signaling for the sake of the brand, or like this is a cool company or startup, and actually looking at like what do the employees actually want. And then an unbiased and empathetic approach is also, sometimes I think we neglect the workplace demands. I've seen so many surveys where people are saying they want to work remote, and then if you look at the leadership, they're like, no, I want them in the office. So, and I think through this COVID, we've seen some organizations have even worked more optimally as remote workers. So, that's kind of my kind of thing as well. And then from a location standpoint, we often center our organizations in like San Francisco. That's really great for venture capitalists and kind of generating that revenue. But, are all your employees kind of represented, if they have to kind of live in a house with 10 other people and, can barely pay that rent. So that's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that, recognizing the human being. It's reminding me of Brene Brown's work. Like when we think about what positive workplace experience is, I immediately think about negative workplace experiences that I've had. Like I think when you really are connected to a positive workplace experience, there's something inside of you that is feeling like connected. Michelle, what do you think? What's for you the most important requirement for workplace experience strategy?
So I would say building off of what everyone else has said so far, but also focusing on something that Justin brought up, which is the vision. Without a clearly defined vision, it almost feels like there's no soul. There's nothing for people to come together around. The strategy can become untethered because there's nothing that's really creating a common good that we're all part of. So to me, without like a really clearly defined vision that everyone can buy into and feel ingrained in, everything else starts to kind of fall apart.
Yeah, and it sounds like there's some also more like concrete, like a strategy with the plan to like keep things moving down the track in that too. Thank you. And Joe, what do you think the most important requirement for really what goes into creating a comprehensive workplace experience strategy?
Something that tee off from Michelle had me thinking about, something Steve Jobs said was the why of why you do it. And that's the biggest push. But I really think that the leadership, like Ellie was saying as well, having all those multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary in with the boss to make the decision. I mean, he may not sound like he's making a decision, or she may not sound like she's making a decision, but the reality is they are actually steering the boat.
Great, thank you. Good reminder. Well, I really appreciated like the breadth of perspectives on that question. Next one I have is for Jonathan and Justin specifically. I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on this. From HR and facilities perspectives, what benefits or challenges have you experienced in participating in interdisciplinary teams while working on workplace experience projects?
Yeah, I would say, it's part of the benefit and the challenge really to have, the interdisciplinary approach. Part of the challenge I would say is, you have all of these differing opinions. Everybody has what they feel very strongly about based on where they sit and what their workplace experience is, right? But that's also the benefit, right? When you're really working to find a best solution, I think in any situation, it's always better to have more information than less information, and when you can really understand across every discipline what is important, you're able to come up with a more comprehensive strategy. And so my advice is always to hear as much as you can, and make it make sense as best you can, and then that will help you formulate the best solution in the end.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with Justin 100%. I think the benefits is you're not in the echo chamber, right? So, that's why I really like mixed communities. That's why I like hearing other people's point of views, because, if everybody's telling me I'm right, I'm going to continually do these things and they might be completely wrong. So I like when everybody's represented. I know, little about HR, and just like that, I don't expect HR to kind of know how a TI build out's going to go. And from a challenge standpoint, I mean, I think obviously there's the battle for power, kind of like Ellie was talking about in the intro. Sometimes they can be dismissive to other teams if the head of HR is kind of running everything and they're very HR focused, right? And maybe facilities and IT gets dropped off by the wayside, and they could have some important things to add. So I think those are the challenges.
Thank you, guys. For Ellie, Michelle, and Joe, what practical tips do you all suggest for establishing a diverse and inclusive workplace experience strategy team? So we talked a lot about incorporating everyone's perspectives. What are your tips for pulling that team together? Ellie, why don't you kick us off?
I can start.
Okay, go ahead, Michelle, please.
Go ahead, Michelle.
So one thing that I have noticed is that we, as people, we have a tendency when we put teams together, while we're trying to think about being inclusive and diverse, we need to think about diversity of personalities as well, because we often put together teams of people that get along with each other, that have similar kind of personality traits, and oftentimes that will lead you into groupthink. So making sure that you're thinking beyond just the people you can get along with, and having a little bit of the devil's advocate in the group as well, to prevent that groupthink.
So I'm thinking that, it's one thing to collaborate and co-create amongst subject matter experts like ourselves when we come together in interdisciplinary teams, but we have a responsibility to also help to build interdisciplinary partnerships within the organization, among teams and departments, and even individuals that are working together to create the workplace experience alongside with us. And so that, I think, is one practical tip that I would encourage everyone to consider, is just making sure that we are encouraging those partnerships internally to organizations, and that all levels of the organization are included as a part of that team.
Thank you. Joe, what do you think?
It's interesting. Michelle talks about diversity of views, and I'm also end up a lot of loggerheads. I don't know, it's my background from the Marine Corps or whatever. It's just I have a particular way I'd like to do things, and IT is one part of the world. It's my whole world, but it's one part of the world, and it's to a degree it's saying what I need to say and then being quiet because other people have a view. So.
And that, I think, goes back to Justin's point about listening, like being there, showing up and listening too. I think all of you have said that in one way or another. And for this one is for all of you. I'm curious to know, based on your experience and what we've learned, especially from the experts assessment too, if you want to pull some of that in, who should lead workplace strategy? Where should it be housed or led? Jonathan, let's start with you.
Obviously, the answer is facilities. No, I'm just kidding. I think it's dependent on the company. I've been in some smaller, innovative startups, and there's a lot of cross communication because I sit next to the CFO and next to the director of IT and next to the director of HR, and so it just kind of happens as it is. And so I think that brainstorming and kind of like approach to it where just everybody's kind of brainstorming works well. However, in larger corporations and so forth, I think it works better where either you have a project manager that's kind of running the show, or maybe a figurehead, right? It's the same thing where I always look at Richard Branson. Richard Branson, he's not running Virgin, right? But him, he's the figurehead. He's kind of the ones like, everybody chill out. So that's kind of how I look at it as a whole. But yeah, I'm interested to hear what everybody else thinks.
Ellie, what do you think?
Well, I'm entirely biased when I say this, that I think that organization development or organization design professionals should be leading workplace strategy. That's, we've been doing that pretty much our entire careers, and we're here to really help to increase the health and effectiveness of organizations. And what better way to do that than through workplace experience strategy?
Thanks, Joe. I
found that the boss that could defer to his smart people does really well, and it may be there's one person on the side, but the reality comes down to who's steering the ship.
Michelle?
So again, a little bit biased, but I do think that workplace strategy rests well with a workplace strategy expert or organizational development expert. And I think it's important sometimes to be kind of disinvested from a department and be perceived as someone who doesn't necessarily have a priority or something to gain from the process and be a little bit more neutral. And oftentimes they're in that position and thinking a little bit more globally, as opposed to, I feel like to some extent, some departments become really overburdened with trying to be everything to everyone, and kind of making it a more neutral party helps with that.
Right, and that's part of the idea of this panel too, is that you can't be everything to everyone. So how do we leverage like the expertise in the team? Justin, what do you think? Where should it live?
Well, I actually tend to agree with Jonathan on this. It depends on the company. I think that's a good point. I think that it may make sense for it to sit with HR. I think certain companies it makes sense to sit with the organizational development team or an office operations team. I think it really does depend. I do think, and Jonathan, you made this point as well, that somebody has to manage it, right? And I think that no matter who it is, I think it's really important for somebody to really take ownership of it and drive to completion, because if you say you have a strategy, you have to be able to drive the strategy. So I think sometimes it's less about where it sits, as long as somebody is managing it. Somebody can own it in organizational development, somebody can own it in HR, somebody can own it in a lot of different areas of the organization, but somebody has to be that manager. Somebody has to drive it to completion and ensure that it's actually going in the direction that we say it's going to go in.
Mm-hmm. Ellie and Michelle, I know that Steele and Fox, Steele Strategies and Fox Architects have many years experience of partnering together. When do you guys decide it's time to pull in a partner? We're doing this thing, it involves workplace experience. We know we need to pull in a partner when X, Y, and Z is true. Can you guys speak a little bit to that experience of your interdisciplinary partnership as two different companies, and when you know you need to do that, or how you know that will be worth the work to bring in a partner?
Yeah, Michelle, do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first? Well, so when it comes to the workplace experience strategy, I mean, we've already established that I have a very clear role in OD and change, and Michelle has a very clear role in architecture and design. And so I wouldn't even though my undergrad was in interior design, I don't pretend to be an interior designer. I just, talk the talk. And so I know that when it comes to the space portion of that and developing the experience from the facility side, that we need to partner with a design firm, and Fox Architects has been that for us at Steele and working with Michelle. So that's when but also from the beginning though, we need to be partnering from the very beginning. It's not just working with the organization and then pulling in a design firm or then pulling in an IT. It really should be from the start working together.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree. It's from the very beginning, and you'd be surprised how quickly, once we start talking to an organization, we realize where the holes are. It's more clear than you realize once people start talking, because oftentimes we're brought in just from the architecture and design perspective to fix an organization by fixing their office space. And it becomes very clear once we start talking to staff and leadership that it goes beyond that. And we have our own internal assessment tool that tells us when there's too much divergence between what the mission and purpose is and how they're actually operating. And so it's pretty early in the process that we start to bring people in.
Mm-hmm. And for Jonathan, Joe, and Justin, and your respective companies, can you talk to that too? Like maybe tell us about a successful partnership that has been interdisciplinary and how you knew you needed to pull in that partner.
Yeah, that's a good question. Joe can probably relate, as veterans, I kind of like run towards the problems. Even if everybody's running the other way, I'm like, oh, it's a problem. And so it makes it clear. I'm like, oh, I don't really understand, the ins and outs of what an MPOE is, right? And so I pull in Joe, right? And then I don't really understand. I think most people are eager in the organization to make the organization better, and so usually it's these projects are very fulfilling, and so it's often they reveal themselves really early on pretty easily.
It's the past failures that set you up to realize that no, that's going to be too hard to handle all by myself. I've been there before, and yes, I need to pull help in early.
Yeah.
Joe, what kind of partners have you all pulled in?
What kind of partner have I pulled in?
Yeah, for like the
It's
company. What? Yeah.
well, it's interesting. For years, I avoided a certain consultant because I didn't think they had anything to offer me. And 7 years later, I'm talking to a new guy, and he explained to me what we do as a consultant. It's like, oh, I shouldn't have ignored you 7 years ago. That sounds like good advice, because his advice was advice other companies were doing, and which would drive my boss to say, oh, well, these other companies do it. Oh, well, we should get on board with that. And I was like, and I 7 years ago, I didn't take that advice, and now I'll certainly take that advice.
Uh-huh. Thank you. Justin.
Yeah, so at Datadog, I actually have the privilege of working across multiple departments, and the benefit of that is really getting to see how different leaders react under different situations. But I would say some of the initiatives that we've worked on, whether it be performance management or career pathing, or different things like that, it's been actually really good to see and hear some of the different challenges that every department has. And it's not always about finding a one size fits all approach, but again, kind of talking about those interdisciplinary strategies. Like when you're able to do that and you're able to kind of find the different things that work for each department, a lot of times you're able to find consistencies. So even if it's not a one size fits all, there's often an opportunity to find consistencies. And when you're able to do that, you're able to actually drive the strategy a little bit better, even if you have to make adjustments within a department.
Thanks. I'm thinking too around like workplace experience and turnover and how costly that is, and how when people are having a good workplace experience, you can really attract top talent and keep them. I have a question about measurement. Like, how are you all measuring the workplace experience? What is that like? And let's start, Justin, I want to start with you because you're at Datadog as our person working at a data company. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Datadog is a very metrics-driven organization. I think it's in our DNA for sure. For us specifically, engagement surveys are huge. We're always looking at retention as well. But there's a lot of data that you can pull from, surveys and seeing kind of how your engagement scores are. When you think about workplace experience, I mean, there's a lot of questions that you can really key in on specific areas of the experience that may not be where you want them, and whether that's means that they're bad or they're just below the others, whatever that is, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't look at the other areas as well, but it also gives you some thoughts on how you kind of key in on those things that you can get better at. And I think that we're always watching those scores. We try to do those a couple times a year. And then also, I think it goes back to kind of following through, right? And actually, putting a strategy in place for those areas that you want to improve on, and then actually seeing them through to completion before the next survey, hopefully.
Thanks. Michelle, how about you? How are you all at Fox Architects doing that?
So we also do employee engagement surveys as well to gauge a pulse on where people are. But the other aspect that we look at, both within our own organization and in others, is, are you innovating? Is the organization pushing the boundaries of where they want to be? Are they thinking creatively? Because if you're not, something's not working. And that gets to your bottom line, and that motivates people.
Mm-hmm. Jonathan.
Yeah, I love the surveys as well. However, I'm a, I hate to say this, a lot of people lie on these surveys, and so, presidential polls, right? We were all like, what's going on? How's it so close? And so I think the way I look at it, I purposely invite myself to, like, meetings. So I'll be in like an engineering meeting and they'll be like, who is this guy? What was it? Because I want to hear kind of like on the, like, unfiltered, at their level, like what's going on. And so that's kind of how, it's not a very formal style of approach, but I've always been able to glean a lot of information from that and kind of put two and two together that goes really well with the survey aspect, or kind of like an MPS, or post occupancy evaluations, and I try to kind of like parse those together, to kind of get a clearer picture, if you will.
So Jonathan, you work on facilities and security for Sirius FM and Pandora. Are people surprised to find a facilities and security person so interested in the workplace experience?
I've been very fortunate in my career that I worked for a lot of startups that kind of, it was given to me. It's just like, hey, we don't want to do this, this, and this. Can you please take this? So I was like, yeah. So for me, I always look at it like I'm an anthropologist or a sociologist, right? And so I'm really just interested in how people interact with the space itself, and it kind of just allows it interests me in the actual total experience as well. And so I think, yeah, they're often surprised that I'm kind of like, or maybe annoyed. I know HR and employee experience is probably like, please just leave us a job, right? Yeah. Because it just interests me a lot.
Ellie, what about you? What are your thoughts on data and measurement for workplace experience?
Well, so I think that when we are looking to the experiences of people, it's really difficult to measure. And I'm not sure that we need to measure it through hard data, things like surveys and statistics. I think we just need to try to understand what the experience is like, less through quantitative measures and more through anecdotal, qualitative measures and conversations. Because I think when we try to do surveys and hard data, it's kind of assuming that we can control the experience that people are having, and excuse me, and we can't, but we can only influence them. People, it's their personal experiences, and so they're the only ones that can be in control of that, because I personally think it comes from an emotional place. And how do you measure emotions and experience? So I've been putting a lot of thought, even within our team, again, at Steele Strategies, around how do we measure energy? Because even you said it earlier, you know it when you feel it. We've all been there. We've all felt it when it's really good, and we all been there when it's been really bad. And so how can we measure that energy and map the relationships that create that energy or deplete that energy? So I haven't really thought fully through it, but that's something that we're trying to do at Steele, is think about how do we measure the energy rather than the quantitative surveys
and the real outcomes too, around like absenteeism and presentism, and like engagement in programs, and and bottom line of company goals, for sure. Joe, what about you? How do you what's your take on the data measurement of the workplace experience? What are your thoughts
Data
there?
measurement. So I'm a Star Trekkie, and even the new generation, Counselor Troy, would go around and she would have the individual fix on everyone. She would know where they were. And in an IT perspective, it's that individual helping the individual out, and you're working on the issue, but at the same time, you're interacting with them. So you get an idea of what their pains are beyond the IT aspect of things. You're kind of a psychologist, I guess, at that point. And you're finding a lot of that out. And then you can actually present that to the whole company in an odd manner that doesn't really belie IT at all, but it sets a pattern where you're going overall, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And you have been supporting employees who just very quickly, without warning, are working remotely. And and you have several, like a lot of employees. I imagine that the work that you're doing there in IT is really supporting the employee experience. I mean, I know I have needed a lot of help from my IT buddies, because as we were laughing about before the webinar, I am like the queen of picnic, problem in chair, not in computer. So I'm sure that those employees are appreciating having an IT person thinking about how to make their lives easier.
Well, we know we are cursed under your breath. It just IT knows that. We know you're turning on the charm offensive when we're there fixing your problem, and we know there's a balance somewhere in there. But it's a one company. if you do well in your job, we do well as a company. So anything I can do, we can do. It's the one boat.
Yes, we at Steele, we've been doing a lot of work with a national network called Conscious Capitalism. And it's really, a lot of these themes are reminding me of the work there, that like we can live in a world where partnerships help increase the pie for everyone. It's like a triple win. It's good for the employee, it's good for the company, and it's good for the clients that the company's serving, or the world, or the product that the company puts out. I like that. I feel like I'm hearing a lot of triple wins and all of the things that you all are saying there. I'm going to end with this will probably be the last question that we have time for. I want to ask you all to leave us with a closing thought on interdisciplinary partnerships and the workplace experience. And Michelle and Ellie, I'll end on you guys since you kicked us off. Any volunteers to go first? Kind of, if you want everyone participating in this webinar to have one takeaway about interdisciplinary partnerships and the workplace experience, what would it be? Or like a pearl of wisdom that you've picked up in your experience with these partnerships?
Yeah, I don't mind kicking it off. I think it's important, just to remember that, it's not always easy to get everybody on the same page, but it is worth it. And to get those extra opinions, go a little bit further, dig a little bit deeper. It's often going to give you some really important information, and if you think you've asked why too much already, ask it one more time just to be sure. The 5 whys is something that I've practiced a lot. Just keep digging, and I think that you'll eventually get to that answer that works across whether it's workplace strategy or other initiatives.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
I think from a facilities standpoint, we have to kind of adapt. We're no longer are we the guy with 30,000 keys, like trapped in a basement, kind of just like away from everyone. We have to kind of branch out, and kind of like what Joe was saying earlier, like he didn't talk to this consultant for 7 years. I look at it the same way, where I think we just need to kind of reach out and never let one of those opportunities to speak to somebody, find out what they do, find out how they can benefit the organization, because you never know when like a small little thing could lead to like great just things happening in the organization.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I guess the paraphrase Rahm Emanuel is change. You never let a good, oh, well, how does it work out? I forgot the quote, but anyway, it's change can be your friend, and you could take advantage of it. That maybe better the world.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Ellie and Michelle?
I would say, building off of everything that everyone else has said, to also don't think you have to go it alone. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to bring in other people and other perspectives. I think oftentimes, especially when things are difficult, there's a feeling that, well, I have to solve it, I have to fix it, or I'm going to look bad, or it's, and any number of anxieties come into it. And the reality is that you don't have to do it all yourself and figure it out yourself.
Thank you.
I would say, so 2 things. The first is employee as partner. Just remember to include them in this effort around your workplace experience, because it's their experience. And then the second is just keep an open mind and an open heart when you're in your interdisciplinary team, because even though you bring such, or we all each bring such a wealth of information and experience, we still have so much we can learn. And if we keep our minds and our hearts open, we have the space to do that. So those are the 2 parting words that I would say, thoughts.
Thank you so much, Ellie. And I want to thank all of you on the panel. Thank you for putting this together. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. Thank you to the World Workplace Conference for having us. It's been really interesting. Thanks. You've given me a lot to think about, and I hope our participants too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Bye.
Megan.
Bye.
This was such an interesting and an important conversation. I think I've learned so much within this last 30 or 45 minutes. So I appreciate all of you guys for being here and sharing your perspectives and participating in our first virtual World Workplace. And I wanted to remind our attendees that The recordings from these sessions will be available on our conference platform until December 31st. And again, thank all you guys for being here, and stay safe and take care.